The Snoopgate debate, reignited by Apple alerts received by several opposition netas, continues to boil. The BJP has now alleged a George Soros link to the entire row, claiming that accessnow.org, a non-profit digital watchdog that's mentioned by Apple as being one of the websites you can go to if you think that your phone is being attacked, is actually behind the hack attack claim which is being made by the opposition. Here's our top story.
It's an all-out political war over alleged government snooping on opposition leaders. A day after sharing Apple alerts over possible hacking, TMC MP Mahua Moitra wrote to the Lok Sabha Speaker seeking a probe. Mahua told India Today that the matter is a serious breach of privacy for targeting BJP-led government.
It is a breach of our constitutional freedoms, which is a fundamental right for all of us. The second is it is against the spirit of Indian democracy and the Houses of Parliament, because the opposition and voices of dissent are completely necessary for Indian democracy. And the third is this is illegal and violates the law of the land, and also it is in complete breach of our privileges as MPs.
Over a dozen opposition bigwigs have alleged that they have received messages from Apple warning them against state-sponsored attackers trying to snoop.
प्रधानमंत्री विपक्ष और बीजेपी के तमाम नेताओं की पूरी मालूमात हासिल करना चाहते, कौन उनके खिलाफ बोलता है, क्या राजनीति हो रही है। एप्पल का नोटिस तो बहुत छोटा नोटिस है, और ये बात जो मैं कह रहा हूं ये बीजेपी के नेता भी जानते हैं।
The centre was quick to dismiss allegations of snooping on opposition, daring the opposition to lodge an FIR and submit phones for forensic probe.
So I clearly think it looks to be either a malfunction on Apple or some prank somebody is playing. It's complete nonsense that the opposition leaders are trying to propagate.
BJP meanwhile claimed an explosive George Soros links to opposition snooping charge, claiming that the alerts of hack attacks were sent at behest of the US billionaire-funded digital watchdog Access Now, which is employed as a helpline for Apple, even accusing Rahul Gandhi of Soros link. Mahua, however, rubbished the charges.
When the government of India investigates this matter, as it has said clearly yesterday, and Apple will be asked to cooperate. I'm sure questions will also be asked of these NGOs like Access Now and the network they run here in India. Perhaps the web portal whose editor is on the board of Access Now will also be sort of questioned, and the entire investigation will look at all these aspects very closely. But what you cannot deny is that George Soros' hand is right behind these messages, and the follow-up messages that have come, they are clearly meant to create a storm here in India, an orchestrated one.
Sure, there's a bigger plot. I mean, given that Mr. Modi and Mr. Adani are running the biggest plot and the biggest con job on the people of this country that we have to be aware of, I think these sort of, counter accusations by the BJP make me laugh. They honestly make me laugh. So I think the fact is that members of opposition have received this. These are credible threats from Apple. Now, if he's going to say Soros controls Apple, that's all I can say.
BJP found ammo in billionaire Elon Musk, who only recently referred to George Soros as a dangerous person who hates humanity.
Soros, I don't know. I mean, he had a very difficult upbringing. In my opinion, he fundamentally hates humanity. That's my opinion.
In a big development, the Parliamentary Panel on Information Technology may call Apple for questioning on the snooping allegations. With Paulami Saha and Ashwarya Paliwal, Bureau Report, India Today.
The BJP is alleging a George Soros angle in the Apple Snoopgate scandal. Is this a genuine connection with an NGO which seems to be quite opposed to the Indian government, or is this just a very far-fetched attempt to try and deflect blame? To talk about the biggest political showdown, we're joined on the news track live by Nalin Kohli, national spokesperson of the Bharatiya Janata Party. squaring off against Mr. Kohli. Suprashirnit from the Congress. I want to go across to Nalin Kohli first, because the BJP has come out today and said that Access Now, which is one of the two NGOs that Apple says you can go to if you want to find out how your phone's been hacked and whom, is funded in part by George Soros. So you're using the fact that George Soros' Open Society Foundations has funded Access Now to suggest that somehow George Soros, and by that you mean anti-Indian government elements, are behind the Apple Snoopgate scandal. So we'll get into that, but why don't you explain to our viewers first and foremost, Mr. Kohli, why do you think that there could be a George Soros angle to this Apple Snoopgate case?
It's in public domain. It's not about the BJP setting up an investigation. This has come in the public domain. For example, let me take funding is an important factor. If somebody is funded through the ISI, say example, in India, they may do anything they want, but that funding would become a relevant factor that they are related to the ISI. So George Soros as a person, and to put it as bluntly, is a man who has a very high opinion about himself and he wants to destabilize governments. He seems to benefit by destabilizing governments and benefiting economically. He keeps company of very interesting people, if I may use the word interesting in that sense. And this is not a Snoopgate. This is a false alarm that one has to look back in context. What happens? Suddenly a set of opposition leaders say, we've received this email. Apple then goes out and puts out in the public domain, as the media reports, that this was in 150 countries, not India. Then they say, no, this may not be the correct position. This may be an alarm only, a false alarm. Government of India immediately says, please join the investigation. We want to know what is happening. What is the state-sponsored thing? Government of India has no time for all these things. There are enough important things to be done. And what does the opposition do? Immediately jump up and start blaming the BJP? I mean, is this what the BJP's job is supposed to be, or the government of India's job? On what basis? What evidence? What credible thing? Just an email comes, and what that email does is link up to an organization that has suspect funding. So this has come in the public domain. All of it has to be considered.
Okay.
And let's not forget, Rahul Gandhi ji a few years ago went ahead, just one thing, Mr. Rahul Gandhi was even willing to meet Cambridge Analytica, and it was reported by the media, an organization that made it an agenda to make sure that elections don't happen freely. So then, therefore, the question that has to be asked is the opposition parties would be willing to link up with any allegation, even if it's funded by people who may not be so sacrosanct, and that too may not be in India's national interests? This is what they will have to answer.
Okay. So I have over here, Suprashirnit, the list of some of the key funders of Access Now, which is one of the two NGOs, digital rights NGOs that Apple says you can go to. And what Nalin Kohli says is factually correct to the extent that open program support Asia Pacific comes from Open Society Foundations, who have donated at least $700,000 to this NGO in 2023 itself, just in this year, 700,000. And if I look at some of the other organizations that are supporting this NGO, whether it is Wellspring, whether it is the Ford Foundation, whether it is Meta, Discord, the Electronic Frontier Foundation, the funding is much lesser. So from the list of funders that we have, which is from the accessnow.org financials website, George Soros seems to be the biggest backer of Access Now, and we know what George Soros' views on the state of the Indian government and in democracy are, leading the BJP to wonder whether dal mein kuch kala hai. How is George Soros involved in this? How do you, as the Congress spokesperson, respond to what's come out now in the public eye? Suprashirnit.
So first and foremost, thank you very much for having me on the show, and it's a good evening to both my fellow panelists and you. I hope because you listened to him in rapt attention, you are not going to interrupt and wait for me to finish. The reality is that I do not hold a brief for anybody. I hold a brief for the Congress party, and as someone who also got this threat notification, I have every business to talk about it. But it seems from what you are saying, and it seems from what the BJP is saying, this has not been unearthed through some investigative journalism that who's funding Access Now. And I will come to Access Now in just a bit. But it does seem increasingly for the last 3-4 months, in fact 6 odd months, that George Soros, some gentleman sitting in the United States, is responsible for 90% of what is happening in this country. then why do we have an elected government? Why do we have agencies which have become frontals of the BJP, quite literally? Why do we have law enforcement? Why do we have investigative agencies? Why do we have ministries of information and technology, or for that matter, CERT-in? So that's point number one. Point number two, and I want to make 3 points here. So my point number two is Access Now and Citizen Lab just last month, for your very information, just last month, they actually assessed certain threat notifications that were sent to 3 people in Russia. It was found to be true. 2 of them were journalists. Their phones were hacked, and indeed they were being snooped upon. So that was not a false negative as they would want to claim it to be. And the third and the last point that I want to make, and very briefly in the next 30 seconds, I want to rewind to what has happened in the last 24 hours. Some of us in the opposition, including myself, we got a threat notification from Apple on our phones and as an email, and which said that your phone can possibly be subject to a state-sponsored attack, which essentially means your phone could be hacked and there could be snooping happening on your phone. The reality is that large sections of the media, which is laughable, and of course India's IT minister went to town with an Apple statement. But that Apple statement was on its website and in their reference notes from August 23, which means 4-month-old statement was used by India's IT minister and the media's breaking news to defend. The reality also is that Apple in its pre-drafted statement also says there could be some false negatives, which in simple English means there could also be some positives. As responsible citizens of this country who get a threat notification like that, what do you expect us to do? Keep quiet, hide under some rock and pretend it never happened? I think as responsible citizens, we brought it before the government. But the minister who sat there, and I have him on record, the minister who sat there did not know anything. The minister who sat there said, we will involve CERT-in, which is a technical division of the government of India, reports to MEITY, and that is going to do the fact-finding. The reality is that CERT-in on the 27th of October this year had issued an advisory, had issued an alarm and said that these phones, without upgrading to iOS 17.1, are susceptible, are vulnerable. On the very same day, on October 27th, Mr. Ashwani Vaishnav was tweeting phones made in India by Tata.
Okay.
That's the reality. He did not even know that CERT-in had already issued an advisory. So this is the left arm not knowing the right and blaming India's opposition. I mean, get your marbles, guys, and get over the George Soros mania. You have been given a mandate. Okay. You will be voted out very soon.
We will come to who gets voted out later, Suprashna, in just a moment.
When you say that.
Mr. Kohli, if it hadn't been for the likes of Access Now and Citizen Lab, we wouldn't have ever found out about the Pegasus Snoopgate scandal, about the existence of high-end technical surveillance software like the Israeli Pegasus. All of this came to the knowledge of the world because of NGOs like Citizen Lab and Access Now, and while they may be a real pain for the government because they keep ferreting out information which you don't want, the fact is that they've played a certain role, maybe not pro-government most certainly, but in keeping our democracy going, in ensuring that information which the government doesn't want out comes out to the public domain. In the 1970s, Indira Gandhi always used to find a foreign hand in everything that went wrong. It seems now you find a George Soros hand in everything that's not going your way. Mr. Nalin Kohli.
I'll answer both, and I'm glad you asked both, because there would be points that I would have raised without you asking the same questions. Let's start with Pegasus. The opposition went to town screaming, Pegasus, Pegasus, Pegasus. The Supreme Court finally appointed a committee. The committee said, will you give your phones? Mr. Rahul Gandhi was the first one to run away from giving his own phone. He's the one who made the maximum amount of sound bites on this. My phone is waste, Pegasus is there. What happened? Why didn't you give your phone? Whatever phones the people chose to give to the committee, they said we found no evidence to that. So it was a false alarm in which India's democracy is in danger, constitution is in danger, Supreme Court was invoked. They ran away. Miss Priyanka Vadra Gandhi, she said my children's phones is being targeted. She got a message, please give us the phone, we will check it. No, we deleted the message, it's not required anymore. You can't have it both ways. This is called spit and run. You spit on someone and run away. Either you say there is a conviction that we are making an allegation, we want to get to the truth of it. The truth is being monitored by the Supreme Court. We bow to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court has made a committee. The committee wants to see our phone. Get it checked. We will give it. That is not done. The same thing, let's go further. You spoke about Indira Gandhi and the foreign hand. What a glorious movement. Mrs. Indira Gandhi used to say there's a foreign hand in everything. Mr. Rahul Gandhi used to always say, and other Congress leaders, in fairness to all of them, we fought to get India independence from the British. And now let's take all his statements in the last, say, few years. Meet Cambridge Analytica, who is known to have interfered in electioneering in various countries. It's a fact. It was reported in the media. The video was out. Here he goes abroad and says, what are Europe and America doing about Indian democracy? He is the man who abuses the government the most. He abuses the Prime Minister. Is he in jail? Is he being threatened under any law? No. The Constitution is functioning beautifully for everybody, including him. He has freedom of speech as much as you, me, or Ms. Srinik. There is no change in that. He is not being stopped from speaking or criticizing the government. But the point is, he is the one who goes abroad and says, what are you doing about it? When a furor takes place here, then the next statement, which is at another event, is brought up to say, no, this is his statement, the old one wasn't. What is happening? Mani Shankar Iyer goes to Pakistan and says, Inko hataiye, humko laiye.
No, but Mr. Kohli, can I pause you for a moment to remind you of what the bench, and you're a leading lawyer yourself, the bench comprising Chief Justice of India, N.V. Ramanna, and Justice Suryakant and Hema Kohli had said in court in the Pegasus case that the government of India did not cooperate with the committee. The government had declined to disclose whether the spyware was used to snoop on citizens. So if the government didn't, I'm coming back to Supriya ji. If the government didn't cooperate with the technical committee to investigate Snoopgate, you're blaming Rahul Gandhi here.
I will say it as blunt. Yes, I've got the question. Rahul, and I'll say it as blunt. You, me, and anyone else on this panel and on your panel and your colleagues and our families, sleep safe in the night because somebody in some agency is tracking terrorists and the anti-India people whose entire job is to somehow, behind the walls, in the dead of the night, form sleeper cells and kill innocent people. It happens because nobody is willing to accept it, but then every country is entitled to have a spy setup and a spy intelligence setup that does its duty. It can't be misused against its citizens. But what are their rights in terms of how they manage it cannot be disclosed either. Like in the Rafale case, a whole hue and cry was made that it's a big scam. Did it go to the Supreme Court? The government gave full details in a sealed cover to the Honorable Chief Justice, then Ranjan Gogoi. No scam was found.
Okay.
They wanted us to reveal the weaponry that plane is to carry. So, I mean, everything is in a context and a limit.
Okay.
You can't just sit down, make an allegation, and as I say,
Kohli
spit and run.
accuses the Congress and Rahul Gandhi of spit and run, wanting to have it both ways, level the charge that the government is using tech software like Pegasus, but not hand over the phone to the technical committee for examination. If you don't give the phone, how is evidence to be found? Rahul Gandhi did the wrong thing last time. Now, how is this time going to be any different? You can level whatever charge you want, but unless you cooperate with the investigators, we'll never know whether this is true or not. Supriya.
So we are rediscovering English language because it was always, the phrase was hit and run. Now we are saying spit and run, but good. We should reinvent language when it suits our purposes. I will answer your direct question, but I want to say on record that the Supreme Court appointed committee and later the highest court in the land said that the government did not cooperate with the Pegasus probe. Point number one. The government has so far, till date, not issued a denial or not given an affidavit in the court stating they did not use Pegasus. They have not done that. If you are so clean and you want to come clean, issue an emphatic denial, which you haven't done. You did not even give an affidavit in the Supreme Court. And point number three, which is very important, the Supreme Court committee had probed 29 phones and 5 of them had malware. I will name a friend here, Sushant Singh. He had not just given his phone, he had also deposed before the committee. He had also given an affidavit. What happened to all of that? Where has that led to? Because the government conveniently chose not to cooperate, and nobody can come out with the truth if the government wants to look the other way. So you want to say spit and run and hit and run and all of that. You buckled and you have not told the truth to the highest court of this country. Don't you dare talk about what we do. I also want to state one that, so I hope I've answered your question on phones being probed or not being probed. I also want to state something very emphatically here, and it's a very important point that I want to bring about. It was said here that spyware is being used to track lethal terrorist sleeper cells or something like that. Absolutely, it should be done. India's security is paramount. But are you telling me that members of the Indian opposition, including people like myself, who I consider the greatest patriot ever, you think we are sleeper cells? You think we should be snooped upon? Do you want to come out emphatically and state, have you or have you not used Pegasus or any other spyware?
Okay.
How come the cabinet secretary to whom the intelligence agencies report, why does he not come on record and for once and for all say, either we have or we have not used? And I have one more important thing to say here. If you are indeed using snooping, and it's such an irony that these messages and these snoopings and these charges are all coming towards opposition. How come no member of the BJP has got a similar message like this?
So we'll come to it.
And they're all using iPhones. They all are on mails. How come they haven't got a message? How convenient. The selection pool is so convenient because this is what the BJP wants. And I want to state one thing very emphatically, Rahul, one last point. The Financial Times, a paper that they may want to hate, but one of the most credible papers on the planet, the Financial Times in March put out a report saying that the union government had put out tenders for spyware ranging from 133 crore going upwards to 10,000 crore rupees. Either the government issues a denial on a story like this, or it comes out and says, what are you using this spyware for? And the reality is, you cannot keep telling us to give our phones. We have given you evidence. None of us are lying. We have put out messages in the public domain. People in the past have given their phones for verification. What have you done about it? You chose
You
not
said
to
Rahul
cooperate.
Gandhi didn't give you his
once
phone.
confirmed or denied.
He didn't cooperate with the technical committee, but 29 citizens did.
Several others
And
did.
the Supreme
29
Court
people did.
said in its response that the technical committee found malware in 5 of the 29 devices that it got. It failed to determine whether the malware was Pegasus or not, because the government never confirmed whether they were using Pegasus, so there's no way to know whether that is Pegasus or not. And secondly, let's look at the dramatis persona, those who've received this email: Mallikarjun Kharge, Mahua Mitro, Priyanka Chaturvedi, Raghav Chadda, Shashi Tharoor, Asuddin Owaisi. I don't see Nalin Kohli or any of the BJP people there. How is it that most of these, or all of them virtually, happen to be in some way or the other leaning in towards the opposition or a part of the opposition?
Because you won't find me there because I don't believe I'm an important person and I don't live in that false hope. Very simply put, I can see a conspiracy angle in that very list. Now let me take another story.
Either you've
No,
got
once again, Supriya ji, we've had a good debate so far. Nalin heard you peacefully. No, once again, it's not right. No, once again, Supriya Shrinath, Nalin heard you quietly in a dignified fashion. Argue through the power of your rhetoric and your argument. Don't interrupt. Let him complete. Nalin Kohli, no government person here. Point number one. 5 phones had malware. 5 phones had malware. You couldn't decide whether it was Pegasus because the government didn't accept it uses Pegasus.
Let me answer.
Nalin Kohli.
I heard you. Look, Rahul, you will have to credit me with some basic intelligence that I keep track of my arguments. I do it on a daily basis in the court. I heard your question. I'm going to answer it. Let me now come to the point I was making. So the opposition is building a narrative, and quite interestingly, it's the most logical narrative that you would like to build. That look, all these names are opposition party people. Since they received the notification, therefore this is the government of India doing it. Now let me say another thing equally, and that's logical and it's possible. It's probable that a set of people who have an interest to hurt government of India specifically target opposition parties and they become absolutely pawns in the hand of something. I mean, do you really take it that this is to be done in it's a clumsy effort as far as I see it. Really clumsy. It is so clumsy that one should laugh at it. If you go to an ordinary investigator, forget about a high-end investigator, they'll say this looks like a conspiracy in which they have been made the pawns. And they're happily being made the pawns because they want something to be able to attack the Modi government. They can't attack the Modi government in terms of its popularity, in terms of its performance, in terms of its leadership. Because you can't do it, so you look for non-issues, then make them as these big issues with this self-importance. Oh, we are so important, therefore, we are being targeted. Do your job. Go to the people of India. Go and tell them this is my alternative. This is what we believe in. The infrastructure being built by Narendra Modi is not good enough. We will do it like this. We have done it in this state. They can't do that, no. So they don't have a narrative. To not have a political narrative is the only way out is build another narrative.
Okay, so respond now to the second question. 5 people had malware found on their phone. We couldn't determine whether it's Pegasus because the government wouldn't confirm whether it was using Pegasus or not.
What did so finally, yeah, so fair enough. Now let's go simple, and this is my daily job as a lawyer. The matter went up to the Honorable Supreme Court. The matter is finally now sub judice and was a Supreme Court matter. What did the Supreme Court do then? Did it hold something and say anything? No, we want a further thing. They treated the matter as closed. Whatever be the reasons they did it, you don't like a judgment, so you can't turn around and say, I don't believe in the Supreme Court. You like a judgment, so you will say, I like the Supreme Court. Life is not like that. If you invoke the Supreme Court, then you have to wait for the result and the action out of the Supreme Court. I don't need to answer for that because that is finally by the Supreme Court, period.
You know, now here's the point. I'm running out of time. So, Supriya Srinath, quick word. Nalin Kohli says that this is a very non-sophisticated way of attempting a hack. Let's assume that somebody in government was indeed attempting it. Now, 21 people, largely from the opposition, have come out and said that their phones were hacked into or attempted to be hacked into. Now, how do all those people get attacked by whatever sophisticated state actor this is around the same time? Even if the government were to say, want to hack you, Mallikarjun Kharge, Mahua Mitro, anybody, Priyanka Chaturvedi, they would do it over the months and set it up one by one. It's highly unlikely that they'll have 21 phishing attacks or 21 hack attacks will happen at the same time. That just sounds very basic. It doesn't sound like a sophisticated operator at play.
This isn't a sophisticated government to begin with. But I have a very simple point to ask both you and Mr. Kohli here. If you got a similar message on your phone, or if somebody at home did, and especially if a woman did, and it said that you could be under a state-sponsored attack and they could have access to your phones, your cameras and your microphones, what would you do?
What have you done since?
You just turn on the bed.
No, so what have you done? Tell our viewers, what have you done, Supriya?
Listen to me. Or would you be worried? Please. Don't interrupt me. You have not interrupted him once. Don't interrupt me. Let me finish my argument. What would you do? Would you turn around on the bed and sleep the other side? No, you would not. You would want to bring it up in public domain because it took us a while to understand what was happening. And when we took it up in the public domain, we expect the government of India to responsibly respond. The government of India is holding a 4-month-old statement of Apple and trying to hide behind it. I asked a simple question. Mr. Vaishnav said there sitting, he's the MEITY minister, he said there sitting that we are going to involve CERT-In. CERT-In had already issued an advisory and a warning on the 27th of October. The government of India didn't seem to know about it 4 days later. And he's talking about their involvement. He's talking about roping them in, which tells you how this government functions. Maybe Mr. Vaishnav doesn't know a thing about snooping here because maybe his higher masters are doing it. But the reality, Rahul, is that if you expect us as responsible citizens to be quiet because somebody is going to say we are clumsy and we are pawns, that's not going to happen. And if anybody thinks that by doing this we are not going to criticize the government or put them in the dock or hold Mr. Adani accountable for all the misdeeds that he's doing, we will continue to do that. And to the one point that Mr. Kohli made in the next 10 seconds, I simply want to say whether it's Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, Rajasthan, Telangana, Mizoram, you are facing a rout. You will be given a run for your money and for your votes. So don't sit here on your high pulpit and tell us what we should be doing.
We'll come to that during our exit poll and on the 3rd of December.
So learn some lessons, get some humility and stop snooping.
Start snooping? I thought you said stop snooping. Don't start snooping. We don't want Mr. Kohli
The only humility that's needed is in the arrogance that's coming from the other side.
I said stop snooping.
No, but Mr. Kohli, in conclusion...
No, you kept telling how you're a lawyer and your arguments are so good. I thought I had to retort with equal fervor, if not better.
No, but Mr. Kohli, the fact is that several people in government and outside, when they are calling, they're calling either on FaceTime or on WhatsApp. Many I've seen have gone back to older version. Have gone back to older version phones. They're not using high-end. I'm asking the same question. No, one second. I've understood your question. I'm asking the same. Supriya ji, I'm also out of time. I have a very important guest on the other half. I'm out of time.
You are not speaking to people other than WhatsApp or on FaceTime.
Ma'am, I'm out of time. Ma'am, I'm out of time.
Because everybody believes the big boss.
So let me ask. Let me ask that question to Nalin Kohli. Nalin Kohli, most people in government, when they are calling, most senior bureaucrats as well, are using FaceTime, are using WhatsApp calling. They're not using the traditional phone in the way that they would. Now, their concern could be that maybe some international state actors doing it, whatever, or maybe they're worried about what's happening internally. We don't know that. But the fact is they're moving away. And all of
Can
this,
I answer it?
all of this would lead people to wonder, kya dal mein wakai mein kuch kala hai? Nalin Kohli, final words.
Just two things, Rahul. The first is that obviously if they receive emails, they're going to expect the government to do something, and the government is doing it. But you don't begin by saying the government has done it. On what basis have they said the government has done it? What is the evidence that they say that government of India has done this? There is no evidence. It's just their own desire to run down the Modi government, period. And now let me answer the second part of your question. I don't use FaceTime. I don't even have an Apple. I use a normal Android phone. I call normal. I call WhatsApp also when the normal call doesn't get through, because data sometimes works better. Sometimes data doesn't work better, so I call normal. I don't understand what the paranoia is. If somebody wants to be paranoid, you can also be paranoid sleeping in the house thinking the fan will fall on you. That is up to you. I'm not here to solve people's paranoia.
Okay.
In my life, there is no FaceTime. Period.
Okay, so we've heard from the BJP, we've heard from the Congress.
Thank you.
On the show. Rahul, 1 second.
I'm out of time, Supriya, I'm out of time, so you need to make it very quick.
I challenge all three of us to open our phones and put out the logs. Not one person is speaking on open lines today because people are scared, including my friends within the BJP. They don't want to talk on open lines because they know that they are being snooped upon. There is a fear in this country. They believe somebody is listening. That's the kind of environment the BJP has created. Let's open our logs and let's show the people we are talking to and which lines are we talking on.
Okay.
Mr. Kohli may be an exception.
Now, I have no problem.
Okay, so we've heard from the BJP, we've heard from the Congress. We will track this story. This story is not over and done just yet. We'll track this story carefully.